All right, we're live. Um, Friends, waste is one among many global challenges we face that has local solutions. And it takes hundreds of thousands of people acting in their capacities and capabilities to make true long-term change. Back in 2013, we found that millions of people around the world are looking for solutions, are trying to understand what they can do as whether they're government employees, activists, businessmen, and or general public. And they're trying to find solutions to and through waste. And for them, the only avenues available to get that kind of knowledge was conferences or extremely long PDF reports, both of which were inaccessible. And good knowledge was behind paywalls, and half-baked information was easily available online. And that led to the platform you're on right now. So friends, welcome to Be Waste Wise. My name is Ranjit Anipu, and I'm a co-founder. We've been providing high-quality expertise in easily accessible formats to thousands worldwide since 2013. We are now the largest platform for live events and video knowledge in circular economy and waste management sectors, thanks to contributors like Beth Terry. Beth participated in one of our first ever series of talks in 2013. And since then, we've had many experts provide solutions to plastic pollution on our platform. She put this panel together because she wanted to do something that will help the Plastic-Free July movement. So we started talking about individual action and systems change on both hands, because in my full-time work, I'm a waste management consultant, and I get this question often from many people. And the question is, what do I do? Or what does my community do? And the response to that question is generally either individual action or systems change. But both Beth and I, we believe that these are complementary and cannot happen without one another. I think they're both sides of the same coin that needs to roll. So whether you have a question about individual action, collective action, or about systems change, you have two very good guides in Rebecca Prince-Ruiz and Stiv Wilson, who will help you through that journey. Now, we're really glad to have Beth on Be Waste Wise again. I'll always remember her as one of the pioneers in the plastic-free movement. So, Beth, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Ranjit. And just happy Plastic-Free July, everybody. I think I met Rebecca. So I just a little bit about myself. I've been attempting to live a plastic-free life since 2007, when I learned about plastic pollution in the ocean, and was motivated by seeing pictures of dead albatross chicks, dead birds that had died because their mothers fed them plastic, mistaking it for food. And that had a really big impact on me for whatever reason back then. And so I just decided to try to live without acquiring any new plastic and see if that was possible. I didn't really know anything about the entire global plastic problem besides the fact that animals were eating it. I didn't know if it was possible for one individual to live without plastic. I didn't know what alternatives were out there. I didn't even know if I would do it for more than a week, but I just thought it would be a fun experiment to try. And that's been over 10 years. It's been 11 years this year, actually. And I have learned a lot and met a lot of really amazing people along the way, and been able to collaborate with them and learn also that while my personal changes and personal actions, I still feel are really important. And I'm still to this day trying to live without acquiring new plastic if possible. And I just moved from the west coast of California to the east coast of Maryland, and I'm in the process of setting up a new house and trying to do that with as little waste and as little plastic, but also just in as minimal a way as possible. So that's fun. But I recognize that those individual changes that I'm making are not enough if we're going to solve this huge problem. One of the people that I met along the way a few years ago was Rebecca Prince-Ruiz, who is the founder of Plastic-Free July. Plastic-Free July has grown into this huge movement, and organizations and companies and people all over the world are mentioning it and in their marketing materials and in their campaigns and doing things around Plastic Free July. But I wanted you to learn to meet the woman who started it and learn her goals for Plastic Free July, which she has just formed into an independent nonprofit organization. So Rebecca, why don't we start with you? If you would introduce yourself a little bit and then tell us what is Plastic Free July, why did you start it, and where do you see it going?
Thanks, Beth, and yeah, really honored to be part of this panel. And so the Plastic Free July is a very interesting campaign in that I didn't set out to start a campaign. I just set out to change myself and my own behaviour after I visited a recycling facility. So this is back in 2011, and I started working in local government and went to a recycling facility for the first time as part of running an adult education course. And we first went to the landfill, and I knew a tip, and I wasn't surprised, but going to a recycling facility really just blew me away. And I was overwhelmed by, first of all, the amount of waste that we were producing, and then learning about the complex and energy-intensive process to deal with it. And I went home that night, and I'd always felt really good about recycling. And it's not that recycling's not important, it is, but that should be our option of last resort. And so I went to work the next day and said, you know, I'm going single-use plastic next month. Who wants to join me? And this was June 2011, and there were 40 of my couple of my colleagues and our volunteers joined in. And it was really after, like I said, seeing the volume, the complex process, and learning the particular challenges around recycling of plastics and then plastic waste in our waste management facilities, as well as obviously what happens when it ends up the wrong place in the environment. And you know, the rest is history. So it's really grown into this global movement. And I think what it's done is captured this shared concern that so many people have. I don't think there's anyone that sees those images which so moved you, I know, Beth, of the plastics in the stomachs of the albatross, or seeing all that plastic waste we're producing, and says, actually, I'm okay with that. Like, no one's really happy with it. And I think what Plastic Free July, this challenge, which really, first of all, raises awareness of how much plastic we have in our lives, and secondly, it is a challenge to do something about it, brings these shared concerns to the surface and gives us the opportunity to do something and be part of the solution in a connected way. And I'll never forget the first time when I went to my local cinema and saw Bagger, and there was this woman in Oakland. I didn't even know where it was, and here she was managing to fit all this plastic in one jar. And you know, I didn't know how to live plastic free, and nor did the other people that were doing it. But together we had some ideas, and Beth had a bunch more ideas, and it grew from there. And I think it's this great example of thinking globally and acting locally. And we've seen it grow from people changing their own lives and their own behaviour and their choices, and feeling empowered to do that, because they're not the only, you know, the one strange person. They know all these other people, you know, in their community and around the world that have this concern. And then it's grown into schools and businesses and greater change. And it's been just, you know, whilst obviously this is a growing problem, to see this movement. I mean, I've only been involved over the last 7 years, and I know Beth and Stiv have been working on this for much longer, but seeing this growing awareness and engagement of people willing to be part of the solution is really exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. And especially this year, there's been so much more media attention, the National Geographic and documentaries, and just people all over the world finding out more and more about it. And Stiv, I met you sort of towards the beginning, I feel like, because you were writing an article for Good magazine. That's what I remember. Do you want to explain who you are and how you came to this issue?
Sure. And thanks for having me here. It's great to be on Be Waste Wise, and good to see you virtually again, Beth. My name's Stiv Wilson. I'm the campaigns director for the Story of Stuff project, and I got into seeing it on a beach more than a decade ago in Oregon, and that led me to sort of Google a lot to see, you know, what was this issue, and that put me down a rabbit hole journey that changed. I quit my job as a journalist. I sailed to for the Five Gyres, an organization called Five Gyres, which I helped start in 2009. But after, you know, coming back to land and, you know, looking at what I could do, I started asking, what could we do? What could we do to flex our sort of citizen muscle and civically engage to create product policy and such? And started with a plastic bag ban in Portland, Oregon, and that's where I sort of got my feet wet. But gradually have moved both upstream in the supply chain all the way to oil and gas, and where this stuff comes out of the ground and how it gets refined before we even see it. And have found that, you know, that pollution story is from regards to human health is concerned. I think aesthetically we see the plastic all over the ocean and the beaches and stuff, and it's frightening. But I think what, you know, I've learned is that plastic pollutes at every part of the supply chain, and it's coming at breakneck speed. The amount of plastic that is being produced ramping up in a way we've never seen. So I think working a lot within my organization to adjust how we campaign to be more systemic, but also building a global movement as one of the architects of the Break Free from Plastic movement. And then lastly, what I just talked about is we're making a film called The Story of Plastic, which will be a feature-length documentary. But I think a lot of the viewers will be surprised that the ocean piece of it is going to be probably only about a minute and a half. You can see where plastic and how it travels all around the world.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm really looking forward to that. So let's. I see a lot of questions coming in through the live chat, and a lot of them are related to specific plastic reducing techniques or alternatives. And since this is Plastic Free July, why don't we start with some of those just to get the ball rolling, and then we'll move on. I think there are a lot of really positive aspects to this, which is it's really fun to try to figure out alternatives and be creative and sort of buck the system a little bit and not necessarily stick with what's the products that are offered to us in the store, but find other ways around it. That part is fun. There are other things I want to talk about which are not necessarily as fun, which is what are those problems with plastic. But let's talk about some fun solutions right now. So one person says, the hardest part is how to get rid of trash. I don't want to use plastic trash liners. Paper bags have significant environmental issues as well. Well, for myself, I personally don't use any trash bags, and I don't know if you guys do that or not. But for the wet garbage, I have a little compost container on my kitchen counter, and I put wet stuff in there. And then when that gets full, I empty it into a compost bin in my backyard. And where I just moved, we don't have, where I came from, where Stiv lives and where I came from in California, we had citywide composting. So we would put it in a big city bin, and the truck would come and take it and compost it somewhere else. And here, where I live now, it's on me to do it. And so I have to learn how to compost, and that's kind of fun too. So I guess my main point is if you compost everything that's wet, you won't, then what's left is dry stuff. And if you're recycling most of what you have the dry stuff, then there really isn't that much left in the trash, and you can just put it in the trash bin loose. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about that?
I think I'd like to add in there, Beth, that I think with all of these questions that we get asked about particular single-use plastics that people are trying to avoid, like you just so clearly outlined, it really depends on where we live. So, you know, for me, living on a suburban block here in Western Australia, there's a very different waste management system to if you're living in an apartment in New York where home composting isn't available. So depending on what your local county or council or local government offers, our solutions are going to really, really vary. Where I live, the council does the composting, offers the facility, and we do it in our own home here. But that's not always the case. So I know a lot of people, they'll use the local community newspaper that's in their area, or maybe they still have, I mean, we're all on this journey and we're on different stages of the journey. So some people, they might be starting with the plastic bags, but then they still have some other plastic packaging that they can use, or it might just be saving those wet food scraps and taking them to a local community garden or farmers market. Or if you don't have that option, it might be just putting them in the bin on rubbish days. So it's really, you know, we always say focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. And you know, particularly if you're just starting on this journey, you know, don't try and compare yourself to someone that's been on the journey for a while or has easier options in their area. You know, the dreaded dog bag is always the other question as well that goes alongside this.
Right. And the other thing is, it really shows you, whenever you run into a problem like this, when you run into a wall and you're like, I don't know what to do about this, our system isn't set up for it, that's where you go, oh, maybe our system should be set up for it. Why don't we have this? Why do they have this somewhere else, but we don't have it here? Well, where they have it somewhere else, it's not because it just suddenly sprung up out of the ground like a flat flower, right? It's because people work to make that happen. So these are places where you go, oh, this is an area where I need to speak up and get change made in my area so that we can have these things. And I want to keep repeating that all through this discussion, because these things should be systemic and it should be easier for people to reduce plastic. Do you have
absolutely. I really agree with that. And I remember asking, when I visited San Francisco a couple of years ago, asking you that question and several other people, Beth, about the plastic bag ban, and our then Environment Minister here in Western Australia had said, we're never going to ban plastic bags because they're not a problem in the environment. And what I've seen over the last 7 years is so many people joining this campaign of changing themselves, of making bags out of recycled fabric and offering them in local shops, of councils getting involved, businesses making the change. Like, there's no silver bullet here. It really does take all of us. But, you know, 6 days ago, our state government introduced a plastic bag ban, and we have 85% of the population supporting it. That was not the case 2 years ago, or definitely when we started Plastic Free July.
So, Stiv, you wanted to, we're sort of talking right now about the waste aspect of plastic, but you mentioned that plastic's impact is even stronger upstream in the cycle, meaning extraction and production. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because, you know, one thing that when people ask me all the time, what kind of plastic is safe to eat or drink from? Because plastics have chemicals in them, additives that can leach and that can be endocrine disruptors that can harm our health. Is there a plastic that's safe for me to eat or drink from? I always tell them, you know, just because one particular plastic might be less toxic for you when you're eating or drinking from it, think about the communities that were affected to make that plastic product and to bring it to you. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, where we are right now with oil and gas is that we're not consuming it to the same degree as we have been for fuels. But we have all this massive capital infrastructure in my country, in the United States, that is now looking, instead of making fuels, is now looking to make feedstocks for plastics, to the tune of $194 billion in the past 4 years, to create additional capacity to refine plastics, and with a goal of putting 40% more plastic into the system by 2025. And when you look at this, how this manifests, I was just in Karnes County, Texas, and you have 15,000 people living in this county, and there's a very productive oil shale there called the Eagle Ford Oil Shale. And you have 2,000 active fracking, oil and gas and fracking projects in the Eagle Ford Shale. And you can't breathe in this county. You have people with birth defects. You have respiratory diseases. You have people, with visible skin rashes all over, headaches, asthma. And this is just the same. If you go to East Houston and you look at communities of color and poorer communities who are living right next to these, you find the same thing. You find massive human health impacts, the extraction part of the cycle. So, what I tell people this is, by the time, your potato chip bag gets to you, it's already killed. It's already polluted, and it's already hurt people and biodiversity along the way. And actually, the waste and downstream effects of plastic are far less. From a human health standpoint, from eating fish that have eaten plastic. It's more dangerous to walk across carpeting or open the dryer when you're doing laundry, and you'll be exposed to much more plastic doing that because all of this stuff is materials. Mm-hmm. So it's the way we've been framing this as a movement. I'm interested in looking deeper around how it affects us at point of sale and all the way from extraction.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question here from Danielle. She says, what to do about plastic clothes, fleece? Are Guppy Friend realistic, or do you landfill and not buy anymore? So for those who don't know, more and more information has been coming out about how polyester and other synthetic fabrics shed microfibers of plastic in the laundry. So we're talking about polar fleece, polyester, spandex, etc. And these microfiber particles they're too small to be caught through the wastewater treatment system. So they end up in the ocean, they end up on the beaches, they end up being consumed by sea animals, and end up in the fish that we eat. And there are various companies that are trying to figure out solutions. One is Guppy Friend, is what she referred to, which is a synthetic bag that you put your clothes in, and it captures the microfibers. And I've actually tried it. To me, it doesn't seem like a sustainable solution because it's a real hassle to use it, and I don't know that enough people even would use it. Rebecca, what do you do with the plastic clothing at this point? And what solutions do you have? And Stiv, I know that Story of Stuff has a whole campaign around this, but I kind of want to get Rebecca's thoughts about it first.
Yeah, look, I haven't, to be honest, looked into it in great detail. I've read some of the emerging research, and certainly in our home, we've tended to, for many years now, tried to avoid synthetic fabrics. But in terms of the, so there's always obviously the, you know, don't purchase anymore. But I think the question of what you do with, or what, which we often get asked, is what do we do with what we already have? Like Danielle just asked, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the best answer to that is, other than not buying any more in the first place. And I think it's this, you know, it's going back to this the thing that Stiv was talking about, and really it was watching the story of stuff that alerted me too, is this material is designed to last forever, and there's these problems with the plastic right along its whole life cycle, from the extraction and the production of this raw material to the production of produce to our use of it, and then the disposal. And we're really just, I think, starting to be aware of the disposal and the washing of the items kind of comes into that. But it's all of the other impacts as well. And I think one of the things I've always thought, the irony of the polar fleece was I remember the first time I saw this polar fleece that was made from the recycled plastic bottles, and I thought, that's fantastic, this use of plastic bottles. And then you realise this is what's happening. So I don't know from the life cycle perspective, you know, what the best answer for that kind of future use is. I think we're only just starting to become aware of these upstream problems and the human impacts, you know, up the supply chain.
So, Stiv, do you want to mention really quickly Story of Stuff's campaign around microfibers, and what specifically what individuals can do right now to support that campaign, and what the progress is on that?
Sure. We have a campaign on microfibers. We made a couple of small videos that you can see at storyofstuff.org, story of microfibers, and also did a study that found microfibers in bottled water as well. We made a little video around that. We ran a bill in the legislature, in the California legislature, which would have clothing be labeled to alert consumers that it sheds when it's being washed. That bill was defeated by the fashion and textile industry. And a lot of outdoor brands were very upset about this bill as well. Traditional brands that you might think of as more environmentally progressive were against our bill and were able to defeat it. That's unfortunate. Have actually conducted their own studies to demonstrate how much their fibers have, you know, shed in a specific situation in a washing machine, etc. And you know, the truth is, there's not much you can do. There's, you know, the Guppy Friend is not peer reviewed. It doesn't have any sort of real data on whether it is a true mitigation strategy. That said, there is an.
I just don't think it's even.
What's that?
I just don't think it's practical, because I don't think enough
me
people
neither.
would even use it. You know.
Well, and to your point, the industry is going to frame this issue around the problem of washing machines, and there are 130 million washing machines in the United States alone. So the idea that we're going to get everybody to filter their effluent is crazy. So. Yeah. When you say, what can I do right now? I suggest you start talking to the companies where you buy your clothes, and I do, and start doing that en masse.
Yeah. So you can go to the Story of Stuff website and look up the story of microfibers, and there's information on how to sign up and get involved in that, because we need companies to change the way they manufacture clothing, and we need I feel like we need the companies that manufacture this stuff to take responsibility for what happens to it when it's worn, when it's washed, when it's disposed of. And in the meantime, avoid synthetic fibers in your clothing. I mean, it's difficult, but it is possible. And then, you know, moving on to, so you mentioned that a lot of these companies that that are making clothing out of recycled plastic like I don't mind mentioning names, Patagonia, for example. We, initially we thought, yay, that's such a great thing. They're recycling plastic. They're doing it here. We're finding a use for all this downstream plastic. And now we're finding that those are shedding and causing problems. So I think, but as long as we are going to have this plastic, we do need to find ways to recycle it. So one of the questions from that came in through Twitter is, how do we create more U.S. markets? And I would say not just U.S., but markets locally for wherever you are in Australia, in the UK, and in Europe, in the United States, to create more of a demand for recycled materials so that we're not dependent on China for taking our recycled materials. And he mentions China because traditionally all this stuff has been from the United States and from Europe and has been shipped to China for recycling, and China is saying no more. We don't want all your trash anymore. So I think that's a good question. If we're going to have plastic and it's going to have an end of life, one way to reduce the amount of new plastic is to use old plastic to make new things. And for that, we need markets. So do you want to address that, Rebecca and Stiv? I think Rebecca needs to talk about that one too.
So, I mean, I think that's a really great question. And in some ways, I think that these Chinese import bans, which are actually around the contamination levels, I think it's actually bringing really the recycling issue kind of home to us as we start to consider this. And there was a study published late last year, I think it was, which showed that of all the plastics ever made, 9% has been recycled. And of that 9%, only 10% has been recycled more than once. And I think that whole recycling symbol on our packaging has led us to justify our own consumption of these products. And it's fine because it can be recycled. But I think one of the things which is going to be really critical is to have minimum. Like, if we're going to use this plastic packaging, it's not okay to use it once. And my understanding is that one of the reasons for that is that it's cheaper and easier for the producers of these products to use virgin content. And I think we need to shift towards not having plastic which is recyclable, but we need to have minimum recycled content as a legislative requirement for producers. And because unless we have that, there's going to be no pull through, and there's going to be no market for recycled materials. And it's something we were talking at our board the other day about these Chinese waste import bans of not wanting to take our recycling anymore. Maybe we need to think about what comes into our countries and the types of products we use, not as individuals, but at a societal level. If we can't recycle them, maybe we need to rethink about what we're going to accept and what we're going to use. And I think at the heart of this problem is this real disconnect between the extraction of the materials and the production of these goods and the disposal of them as well.
Yeah. And so, that's an important point. One of the questions here that was sent to us is, what's the easiest plastic to get rid of in your day-to-day activities? And I thought that would be a fun question to answer, but it's also important in relation to what we were just talking about, because, recycling is what you do when you have reduced your waste as much as you possibly can, and then you have stuff left and it needs to be recycled. It's not the number one solution, and Plastic Free July is a great opportunity for people to see how much they can reduce. And as I said, when I first started doing this, I thought I should just be able to substitute one for one. Okay, if something's made out of plastic, I should be able to find it made out of glass or made out of wood or made out of fabric or whatever it was, until I realized that everything has an environmental impact, whether it's plastic or not. So what things have been easiest for you to plastic things have been easiest for you to reduce, and are they things that you've realized you didn't need to substitute with something non-plastic because they were things you didn't need in the first place. Do you want to start with that, Rebecca?
Yeah, well, I'll just start by saying it was a lot harder than I thought. I thought it would be pretty easy because I already had my own bags and didn't want to waste my money on buying bottled water when I could just get that for free from the tap. So for us, it was just starting with the kind of small things, stopping using those produce bags and buying unpackaged fruit and vegetables and starting to look for alternatives. And I must admit, you know, when we first started, I was like, we went through a gazillion paper mushroom bags, putting everything into those until we started purchasing, and we actually made some of our own produce bags. So it started from there. We were already, you know, in our lives using bar soap, and then we went to the bathroom types of products, and certainly, you know, I always think it really depends where you live. And I know spending time with you, Beth, in Oakland, when I finally figured out where that was in the world, you know, there was plenty of bulk food stores and options. Whereas I know for some people there just aren't any options, you know, in their area to get their containers refilled. And so I think it really is variable depending where you live and what your circumstances are. I can say this to my daughter.
You've heard from people since you started Plastic Free July of people getting inspired to open their own bulk stores, right?
Yeah.
I started this too, and that's the thing. That's, you know, let's just always reiterate: just because something doesn't exist in your area doesn't mean it's because it's not like climate. You know, it's not like weather or terrain. You know, these things get started because people start them, and we're all people, and we all have the capacity to do something, to make something, to change something. Stiv, we're down to the last 10 minutes of this discussion. What do you think is the most important thing that people can do during Plastic Free July to really make an impact on the plastic pollution problem?
I think that, you know, the first thing you want to do is to really look at what you consume and see where you can make simple changes. And I'm a big fan of you know, saving all your waste and then looking at it in mass at the end, and then seeing where you can make some personal changes. And then, you know, look at the brands that you can consume. And I think, you know, if you get involved in a cleanup, there's a lot of beach cleanups and watershed cleanups going on during Plastic Free July. I'm much more interested in what brands we're finding in the
We're kind of
lid or something like that. And so, because that's power, that's ammunition. The brands are polluting our environment. That's how we can get the brands to change. If we call it a coffee cup lid, there's no target with a coffee cup lid. You could say it's Starbucks, or you could say it's another coffee place, but unless it says, you know, the brand on it, they're not going to be exposed. So shifting our mindsets from I do to what we can do, and to really put pressure on the brands that are creating these products as a collective, I think is really important. And you know, building some capacity to work with a group of people sets, whether they're marketing or they're speakers or they're policy people or they're whatever, to really start pushing at the brands and at city governments to make changes. Because the truth is, through personal efficiencies, making own personal changes, we can't actually solve this. It's a wonderful place to start. It's a terrible place to stop.
And I agree with you, although I do feel like personal changes are, like you say, a wonderful place to start. But there are aspects to personal changes that people may not think about, which is that when you choose to support a company that is offering products in returnable containers, or offering a different way of doing something that's not just plastic free but waste free, zero waste, you're helping that infrastructure of that type of industry get going. So it's really important, I feel like, to not only put pressure on the brands that are creating the problem, but also to support the brands that are creating alternatives to the problem. And the way we support those brands is with our buying choices as well. We have 5 minutes left. Rebecca, what do you think is the number one thing people can do during Plastic Free July to make a difference?
Woo. I think the number one thing is to do something. You know, that's a bit generic, but I think it's that, going back to what you were just saying, it's that, you know, it's easy to think that our individual actions don't add up. We've been doing some work here in Australia with the behavioural scientists, and we're starting to measure the impact in terms of behaviour change and in terms of waste avoidance, and it does add up. But I think the important thing is to get the message out there for people to start somewhere. As Stiv said, look in your bin, see what the plastics are that are in your life and what you can do something about, and start with one action, form new habits, and then go on to the next step. I don't think there's many people who have your kind of fortitude and resolution that necessarily go the whole hog from the ground up. But I really see that this, you know, small changes does lead to different things. And I'll just quickly share a story. My local cafe, the other day, I suddenly realised, after talking to them for years, they weren't using plastic straws anymore. And I said, what's happened? And they said, oh, we just ran out. And I said, what did you mean? They're like, oh, we ran out 3 weeks ago, and we decided we'd order when the first person complained. And that still hadn't happened. And they said 2 years ago, if we ran out and people complained within a day. And to me, that gives me hope. Yes, we've got a long way to go. Production is increasing, but this problem hasn't developed overnight. You know, we've been manufacturing plastics for over 100 years now, and the solutions are going to take a while.
Yeah, that's a great story about the straw, the running out of straws. So it's, yes, people can't do it all at once. There are personal changes that people can make. There are systemic changes that people can push for. There are resources. We don't have time, unfortunately, to get to all the questions here that people have left through the chat and that people sent through Twitter. But I would like to get to them in a written format, maybe after this is over, and I can work with Ranjit to do that, because a lot of these questions are really important. But the one thing that I want to leave people with is there are resources available. So if you go to the plasticfreejuly.org website, and that you can do one thing that's really important is to register with Plastic Free July on that website. And the reason for that is you don't have to register to reduce plastic in July, but when you do, your name, not necessarily your name, but you get counted. You're part of the numbers of people, and that's the thing that's really important. Numbers are very powerful, and Plastic Free July is now a nonprofit organization, and they are collecting those numbers and those stories of people so that they can make a bigger change. So please go to the Plastic Free July website and register. On that website, there are many resources for substitutions for plastic and ways to get involved and things you can do in your community. So explore that website. My website is myplasticfreelife.com, and I've been doing that since 2007. And probably the most useful thing on that website is if you click on the link that says 100 steps to get started. It's a whole huge list of things that you can do to reduce plastic in your life. And if you want to get involved in campaigns and really working for change on a systemic level, go to storyofstuff.org. And you can look up different campaigns that you can get involved in there and sign up there as well. Does anybody have any last minute thoughts that they are just burning to share?
I think you summed that up beautifully, Beth.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much, you guys. It was great to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too.
And
Thanks for having us.
Happy Plastic Free July.
Happy Plastic Free July.